want to start off by doing a little bit of definitions. The way that we define what a point source or emitter is it's a large emission source. This can be for methane or for CO2, though I'm going to really focus on methane today. It's a large source coming from a concentrated area on the ground, like a localized area. This is typically, a specific piece of infrastructure or equipment. It can also be, a localized region on like a landfill, for example. And so this diagram on the right here is just meant to show these are different types of equipment and activities where we've seen these point sources of methane originating from on US landfills. So it ranges from fugitive leaks from a collection system or cover issues to the landfill working area where kind of active waste is being added to the landfill. Just want to note as well that so there's these other types of emission sources called what we call area sources, which are more spread out and diffuse, and they usually come from kind of a broad area. These also occur at landfills. If you can think through like diffuse spread of methane through cover. This is not the type of emission source we're going to focus on here today, and it's not really, something our organization focuses on, but just recognizing that this is another source of methane at the landfill. Why do we focus on these point source methane emitters and kind of how we think of observing in that context are really important for if we want to combat short-term climate change. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, especially on shorter time scales. This map here is just a screenshot from our data portal, so you can go and kind of access all this data there. But just showing these purple dots are showing where around the world we've detected these large methane point sources in the waste sector. So you can really see that it's not just one region of the world that they're found in, but really across the globe. And these can contribute a large fraction of regional emissions. And so if you really want to combat short-term climate change and have an impact on methane emission reductions, these can be a real tool for mitigation and targeting these sources. There's a couple key factors when we think of how to do this monitoring successfully. One of them is thinking about having kind of global coverage of your monitoring system, especially in regions where we don't necessarily have on the ground monitoring, and we might not have any other types of observational data of true methane emissions. Another factor is having regular monitoring. This is really, important when we think of the waste sector, especially because these sources can be highly variable. And so having repeat monitoring over time so we can get a feel for, is there seasonality in the emissions that we're seeing, for example. So we use both satellite and aircraft, and we can deploy the sensor on either one of these. The sensors that we use are a type of passive remote sensing. So this means that they rely on solar radiation. So this is radiation coming in from the sun. We do this in the part of the radiation spectrum where methane and CO2 absorb, and so we can see any signal from the presence of those gases. We do process data from different instruments, and you'll find this data all on our public data portal. Important thing to note here is that depending on kind of the type of sensor you have in these different, aircraft versus satellite, they have different capabilities. And so just recognizing that when you're going in and you're trying to interpret the data, that, these different instruments have different capabilities. Really want to get into kind of how we work with stakeholders. So to do this, we work with a lot of varied stakeholders. This can range from regulators to industry to other NGOs. Having partners that can help us, translate our data to mitigation action. First, thinking about that kind of direct mitigation strategy. So here, was an example landfill in California where we were able to observe these large emission sources with, this was an airborne campaign, so we used the airplane with the instrument on board. And we saw these large emission sources and were able to feed that information to the operator, collaboration with local regulatory agencies, and they were actually able to go and take action on site and make changes to the cover in other parts of the landfill. And through these changes, they were able to mitigate that source. And we were able to re-observe the site after these changes were made and confirm that, yes, those changes at that part of the landfill were successful. And we do see the intended reduction in emissions. So this is a slightly more zoomed out example of where we were both doing the direct and indirect mitigation. We were observing multiple landfills across the state of California over a 3-year time period. So if you look on the bottom left here, I just have a kind of breakdown of On the top, it's showing mitigatable sources where the operator did not know about this leak and they were able to go out and make changes in response to the data. Whereas this, on the bottom of that table, it's showing this type C. This is types where, these were allowable emissions, and so there wasn't an easy mitigatable solution right at the time. And so this is really a kind of an indirect leading to future mitigation. And then lastly, zooming out even further, thinking more on a regional jurisdictional scale, this data can be used to inform how we account for emissions and how we strategize mitigation at the city scale or at the state scale, for example. How do we bring together these different tools that cities already use to improve their mitigation planning? And so this ranges from the methane monitoring data to the waste data on waste flows and waste characterization, and incorporating this into models. Some key factors here are, having the stakeholder engagement early on to understand, what is it that the stakeholders are interested in, and helping each other understand, where we're coming from. Also having the data collection that's happening, not just the methane monitoring data, but also having accurate information on waste flows. And then also kind of integrating these different tools together, and so that the city can make informed decisions. Some resources that are available if you have more questions. There's an info@carbonmapper.org email here as well that you can email us questions on. I highly recommend signing up for our newsletter. This is kind of where you can get the most up-to-date information.